Hello everyone. So I just want to make an off-the-cuff video here talking about Palestine and how we as creators, as activists, as media personalities, as commentators, as YouTubers, or whatever else, myself included, have failed Palestine heavily, specifically how I think we failed the cause and what we desperately need to learn from it going forward. Even though we have always been against impossible odds, it is still very much our own fault for not having been courageous enough to say frequently enough in the terms that it needed to be said, when it needed to be said, what needed to be said. The Palestine movement has always been an incredibly awkward place due to the notion of Jewish exceptionalism. This is a notion that pervades Western society, and all of you watching this have surely felt it. You feel this ideology when you go to write a tweet, when you go to say something and you catch yourself before you say it, and you think about whether what you want to say could possibly be misinterpreted or spun into something anti-Semitic, and then the next day your life is over. This is what historically, and still today to some extent, prevents us from being able to speak about Palestine in the way that we really should speak about it. And it's just not something that really exists in any other case. It is this notion that anti-Semitic oppression and discrimination against Jewish people is an exception, literally. That's why I'm calling it Jewish exceptionalism. That it is a constant throughout time and place, that it never changes. Basically, it leads us to think of Jewish people, no matter where they are, no matter who they are, no matter what circumstances they are in, no matter what the broader reality of the society that they live in actually is, no matter how they are actually treated in reality, as if they are a concentration camp inmate in the movie Schindler's List. This is the sort of thing that enables the ridiculousness of someone like Ethan Klein suddenly waging this crusade against anti-Semitism as if he is some sort of victim of horrible anti-Semitism from pro-Palestine activists or something, when he's a rich guy living in a mansion in a gated neighborhood, an exclusive gated neighborhood, whose Jewishness literally gave him racially exclusive privileges in that it allowed him to move to Israel. Yet we are somehow expected to walk on eggshells and treat him kind of like a child in a concentration camp or something. But we prevent ourselves from acknowledging that reality. We have prevented ourselves from acknowledging it. We're saying it a lot more now, in part because of the social consequences for not doing so, but also in part because we allowed ourselves to be fooled. And no, I'm not saying there is some massive Jewish conspiracy to fool us about anti-Semitism. Of course not. Anti-Semitism very much exists. Very, very much, particularly in the conspirational right wing. And at times, it becomes very violent. Who can deny the mass shootings against Jews in the last 5 years or so? There's been at least 2 or 3 that I'm aware of, in the USA in particular. But the thing is that a group of people, or groups of people, hate you on this ethnic or racial or religious basis is not the same thing as you facing systemic disadvantage and oppression. When we imagine in our heads historical Jewish oppression, we do imagine a Jewish person who is facing systemic oppression and systemic disadvantage, like, say, a black person in the US or a Roma person in Europe. But the reality is that Jewish people today who face such oppression are very, very few, and most of them, if anything, ironically, live in Israel and they're oppressed by other Jews. So it's specifically this sort of notion of perpetual, unchanging Jewish oppression and the perception of it that exists in Western society that allows Western nations to get away with supporting Israel even after Israel has gone far beyond the point where they would have to do something about any of their other allies. Because of this notion that Jews are sort of perpetually oppressed in the exact same way as they have been for the last 500 to 1,000 years, rather than the dynamic having shifted quite a bit in the last 70 to 80 years or so. And this is so that we can be sold this notion that Israel is exceptional, Israel is different, Israel is allowed to do things that other countries in really any other circumstance would not be allowed to do that would not be presented to us as if they were at all legitimate, that would not be presented to us with euphemisms, with fear of talking about things as they really are. Because Jewish people are an exception. They are supposedly in this unique circumstance of constant and never-ending oppression and peril that uniquely entitles them to do ethno-national settler colonialism. And because of that, it's like crazy to even think of accusing them of being capable of oppressing and harming other people, just as has been done to them in the past. And thus Israel is held to a different standard. And the discourse around Israel has to be very different to what it is about really any other place in any other similar circumstance. I can say very freely, for example, that from 1992 to 1995, Serbians massacred Bosnians for no reason other than the fact that they were Bosnians and they were not Serbians. What if I was to say, for the last 70 years, in Israel and Palestine, Jews have massacred Palestinians for no reason aside from the fact that they are not Jewish, that they are Palestinian? That would cause like a visceral reaction, right? It is true, yet you have to try and think about how you phrase it in a different way. For me, I think about this all the time. I intentionally catch myself and I say, no, you have to say Israeli there. Even though what I'm saying isn't wrong, the people in Israel who massacre Palestinians, they are Jewish. And they openly say that they're doing it because they are Jewish and, you know, these people are not like us. We need a demographic majority. We need to get rid of them so that we can be safe or whatever. The same sort of justification used by every single racial fascist movement in history. But we're prevented from telling it like it is. We prevent ourselves from talking about it in the same exact terms that we would talk about any other similar circumstance. And I think that gets to the crux of how we have failed Palestine, in that Israel is truly horrific, truly horrific. Yet because it is a country that carries out its crimes in the name of Jews, and the perpetrators of these crimes happen to be Jewish, obviously not every Jew is like this. I don't think there's anything specific to Jews or anything like that that causes these people to do this. They are merely doing what many other groups of people have done throughout history, particularly in the vein of European colonialism. But why do I even feel the need to add that disclaimer there, right? Why do I feel the need to add that disclaimer when in any other similar situation I would have no issue just saying these Serbians are killing these Bosnians because, you know, they're Serbian supremacists who hate Bosnians? There's no logic to it. It doesn't make any sense. We need to stop pretending that it does. We need to combat this notion of Jewish exceptionalism. And I know that term sounds bad, but it shouldn't. It really shouldn't, because it's an accurate term. We have been conditioned, not by a grand conspiracy or anything. I don't even think that this has been conditioned into us by groups that are majority made up of Jews themselves. Most Zionists in the world aren't Jewish. It's just conducive to Western geopolitical interests, because Israel is so abhorrent and so terrible that there needs to be this sort of extra element to help the West to justify its support of Israel. And this Jewish exceptionalist notion is that it is the thing that lets them get away with it. For years, for example, there has been this sort of current among the pro-Palestine movement where we kind of feel the need to have Jewish people validate our anti-Zionism. Where, you know, if we are accused of anti-Semitism, we will say, well, we have this Jewish ally with us, or this protest was organized by Jews. How can we be anti-Semitic? It's almost like we feel like people from the same ethnicity who are carrying out the crimes against Palestinians need to validate the fact that we are for the oppressed in this case. We feel like we have to look for approval from Jewish people in order to oppose what is done in Palestine to Palestinians by people who happen to be Jewish, by Israelis. That is us very much abiding by Jewish exceptionalism, because I don't think that Jewish people are special. I don't think we need any special approval from them. You know, Jewish people should obviously be welcomed amongst us, just like anyone else should. But why should they be propped up? In any other case, would we feel this need to seek validation and hold up above everyone else activists who happen to share an ethnicity with the group that is carrying out the crimes? I do not think so at all. And we also are very protective of this notion that, Israel is not the Jewish state. It doesn't represent all Jews, even if it claims to. But who cares, really? Why do we care about that? Would it be legitimate if it did? Would its actions be justified if it did? It's unavoidable, the fact that the subtextual implication of that argument is basically that, yeah, it would be. But no, a settler colonial ethno-state would not be justified under any circumstance. It is only due to this notion of Jewish exceptionalism that we even argue on terms like this. And I think in and of itself that this notion of Jewish exceptionalism causes us to treat Jews differently like that, makes it anti-Semitic itself, because at the end of the day, the goal of any form of anti-racism, whether it be, being against anti-black racism or against anti-Semitism or whatever other form of racism, should be equality, equal treatment. And we're not treating Jews equally. We're treating them as something special. So this is a bit of a ramble. I wanted to write this out and make it really good and stuff, but honestly, I've been too embroiled with work lately and I can't get everything out that I want to say. If I put in the effort for a script with sources and stuff right now, there's too much going on. So this might not be as developed as I would like it to be, but I think it is very important to talk about because I think this is specifically why we were not allowed to talk about we prevented ourselves rather from talking about Israel Palestine in the terms that it should have been in before. And I want to make clear here, I think I was out of YouTubers at least, I was probably one of the people who were most militant on this issue. And I was accused of anti-Semitism by other left-wing YouTubers in ways that made me very disappointed. Even Vorsh, someone who I have quarreled with over the years, who I definitely do not have a high opinion of in any respect. I felt that even though, we didn't like each other at all, I obviously thought he was kind of a moron. I still would have thought that I could trust him because of certain things that he had said about Palestine in the past. But basically the second that he saw the opportunity to attack me on the basis of false anti-Semitism allegations, because I was more militant than many other people were on Palestine at the time, he did so. He brought on to his stream someone who was an out-and-out Zionist and basically treated her as if what I said earlier was true about her, like she was a child in a concentration camp in 1943, rather than what she really was, an oppressor, simply because her ethnicity is Jewish. It's as if she was born a victim. But the fact of the matter is, Israelis, if anything, are a population of perpetrators. They victimize. But this guy, who had previously at times sounded like a really militant anti-Zionist, could not help himself but see this Zionist woman who voluntarily chose to move to Israel as a sort of helpless victim of anti-Semitism because she had been critiqued on her Zionist beliefs by me. This happened about 2 years before the Gaza genocide began. At the time, I was basically in a bubble. In a bubble in the sense that very few people were in there with me. There were very few people who were around who were willing to say the sort of things that I was willing to say, even though I had demonstrated that you were at least allowed to say it. YouTube wouldn't ban you for it. Basic things like Palestinians have the right to resist, Palestinians should get their homes and land back rather. I still did kind of worry very much about my wording of things and stuff like that in ways that I would not have done in other situations. If there was a country that was exactly the same as Israel and did the exact same things that it did, but it was a bunch of Christians or a bunch of, Ugandans or Peruvians or any other group, I would not have, stopped myself. I would not have thought so much about the terminology that I'm using. But with Israel, we had to. We still do have to. But I don't think we should. I think we have to fight this notion of Jewish exceptionalism. I'd say, for example, that on average, African people, like black African people, are way, 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 way more oppressed, victims of way, way more racism. I'm talking about black people in the whole world, by the way, here, not just the US or whatever, but, they're victims of racism way more. Most of them live in countries that are absolutely ravaged by the histories of colonialism, in places where they have immense difficulty escaping from the circumstances that they are born into. Yet still, if there was a land colonized by some group of black Africans, would I pull punches in opposing what they were doing in the same way that I have done in the past with Israel? No, I wouldn't. I would not. I would not stop and think about what I was saying nearly as much. And that is the problem here. We let this narrative of Jewish exceptionalism, which allows the West to keep propping up Israel in ways that they would never be allowed to prop up other nations, we allow it to persist. By playing by its rules, we validate it and we narrow our own ability to speak about the reality of the situation. And that has gotten us to this place that we are in now, where there is a genocide in Gaza. Perhaps if we had not spent the last few decades desperately trying to skirt around pointless, meaningless bullshit allegations of anti-Semitism, we would have done better in the propaganda war, to the point where this would not have been allowed to happen, to the point where things would have been meaningfully different. Children are dying right now. They are being massacred by Jewish people who believe that Jewish people are superior to them, who believe that the children deserve to be killed because they are not Jewish. That is just the way that things are. We need to not be afraid to say that. The exact same way that white colonists massacred Aboriginal people in Australia, or Native American people in the USA or Canada, or wherever else, because they were not white, because they wanted to get rid of them so that they could have the land just for white people. Since October 7th, we've been able to be more open with the way that we talk about this. Other people have began talking how I used to, which is very positive, very good. It's progress. But is it really? Is it progress that for people to start speaking up in ways about this issue where the dynamic, the problem was already obvious before this began, only started doing it after an absolute catastrophe, the destruction of a people? Why didn't we do it earlier? The narrative is shifting, things are changing. But what does that matter if there will be nothing left for us to advocate for? Don't be afraid to talk about these things as they really are. And no, I'm not saying, and no, why do I even feel the need to say this? I shouldn't, but I still do. Obviously, I myself am a hypocrite. But no, I'm not talking about a wake up to the Jewish conspiracy or something. In spite of what dumb fucks say about me, I have spoken out about real anti-Semitism on this platform in far more effective ways than almost anyone else. Excuse the ego, it's true. I know more about Jewish history, the history of the Holocaust, the history of anti-Semitism than almost anyone else who speaks up on YouTube. I've put in the work to study it. I've put in the work to learn about it. I've put in the work to make sure it never happens again to anyone, at least as much as I reasonably can as a YouTuber. There is no global Jewish conspiracy. What there is Western nations who have this satellite colony in the Middle East that they prop up, that is allowed to do things that none of their other allies would ever be allowed to do, purely by the coincidence of the ethnic identity of the people who colonized it. Which, opportunists as they are, gives them this thing that they can point to and say, look, this one's different to the rest. They've been historically oppressed, so this colony should be allowed to do things that the others wouldn't be able to get away with. The fact of the matter is that even if 100% of Jews, every single Jew in the world, thought that Israel was cool and awesome, it would not be any more legitimate. Even if we did not have one single Jewish ally, that would not somehow make an ethno-state run for the benefit of one group of people at the expense of another any more legitimate. I see Zionists and sometimes even people who consider themselves anti-Zionists post like the results of polls showing that, 60% of American Jews like Israel or something like that. And whenever I see that, all I can think is, who cares? Would it be legitimate if 100% of Maoris thought that it was legitimate to go and colonize someplace and repress the people who were there already? Would it be legitimate for any group? Obviously, that's a ridiculous argument, but my point with bringing that up here is that the only reason that people can make that argument and not have it be immediately laughed out of the room is this ideology of Jewish exceptionalism. What I'm saying is going to be misconstrued as, anti-Jewish conspiracism, even though I'm probably the most well-versed person on this platform when it comes to that topic, when it comes to combating that topic, when it comes to identifying it and talking about it. Sorry about the ego. It's not wrong, though. But I don't care anymore, man. I just don't care anymore. And you shouldn't either. But it's needed. It's needed. We have to talk about this. We need to have a discussion about it. We need to think about why we have failed Palestinians to the point that it got this bad. And this is a huge part of it. This is a huge part of it. Because we have wasted so much time limiting the spectrum of our rhetoric, worrying about our lives and our careers, as understandable as it may be, thinking about how we can edit and police our own speech so that it will be accepted by people who are against our cause, by people who want Palestinians dead, so that we will not be denounced by the enemy. If you are a content creator watching this, you have felt what I have felt, where you write something and you immediately get that sinking feeling and you're like, this is correct, but I'm not allowed to say it. I'm so not allowed to say it that even people who agree with me will police me. So pervasive is this ideology. Let's stop. Let's just stop. We, as activists, have gotten people massacred. More people have died than otherwise would have because of the time that we have spent over the decades paying mind to these notions that simply are not true anymore, desperately trying to avoid horrible faith allegations from people who want Palestinians dead, that we are somehow engaging in discrimination or hatred of the people who are killing them on the basis of their race, rather than the fact that the people who are killing them are killing them. This is a conversation that has sorely needed to be had for a very long time, because if we do not understand all of this and we do not work to fight it, if we just abide by the terms of the people who are against us, we're going to lose every time. It may be too late for me to make this video, but I got to do what I can, just like all of us do. Hope to at least start a conversation, as confronting as it may be for some people, because it's needed. It's desperately needed. Because when a rich Zionist living in a mansion who had the privilege of getting a free trip to Israel and automatic citizenship there, because of an accident of birth, starts accusing us of anti-Semitism, of this ridiculous notion that we are like somehow systematically oppressing him, that he is somehow a massive victim or something, when in actual fact, we're talking about someone whose Jewish identity has given him immense privilege on an ethnic/racial basis, because it allowed him to go to Israel and live large at the expense of Palestinians. Yet dealing with someone like that, we walk on eggshells. Rather than just laughing at the ridiculousness of it all, we feel a need to sort of validate it, at least a little bit. I don't think we should. I think most of you will agree, in fact, that we shouldn't. Recently, The Guardian published a truly ludicrous article by British Jewish writer Howard Jacobson, where he said that media reports on the fact that Israel is massacring Palestinian children and babies in droves in Gaza are anti-Semitism in of themselves. Because apparently the idea that Jewish people could intentionally kill children is anti-Semitic. They are accepted from even the thought, the possibility that they could ever do such a thing. Could you imagine a mainstream, globally recognized media outlet that is supposedly super serious publishing something like this in any other circumstance aside from to do with Jewish people/Israel? I sure couldn't. Jewish exceptionalism on full display. There's also the fact that in the world that we live in today, the figure of the Semite, this historical notion of like a conniving, cunning Semitic person, which has usually been projected onto Jewish people, has begun to be projected onto Palestinians and Arabs. Anti-Semitic tropes are now employed, ironically, in a far more effective manner today against Palestinians than they are against Jews. Think about the notion, very common among Zionist circles, that like the UN is a puppet of Hamas. The International Court of Justice is a puppet of Hamas. Somehow this like militant group cut off from the rest of the world, fighting a guerrilla war in a destroyed concentration camp enclave, is also simultaneously pulling the strings at every single important international institution. These are anti-Semitic tropes that nowadays are being utilized far more against another group of technically Semitic people than they are against actual Jewish people. It's crazy, you know. Jewish people today are purveyors of anti-Semitism, as in the utilization of these sorts of conspirational tropes, probably more than these tropes are used against Jewish people, and in ways that are more effective as well, because, you know, the UN gets accused of being Hamas or something, and the UN like scrambles to like try to justify, no, we are not Hamas. Here's an official statement. We are not Hamas. We swear. Please don't call us Hamas. We're so scared of you. I don't know. I feel this is very much unstructured. It's very much a rant. But it's a rant about things that I think need to be said. I think we have failed Palestine in the past. We are failing Palestine right now, even though we are saying more things than we were saying in much clearer terms than we were before. But we're still sort of censoring ourselves a little bit. Even I am, and I'm probably one of the most, the most militant people on here who's willing to go much further in the things that I say than many other people. Who's willing to be much more blunt than many other people are. I'm pretty widely hated for not coddling the feelings of oppressors, I would say, in general. But I also feel like other people are coddling the feelings of oppressors less than they were before, which is a positive, but it's come at the cost of a mountain of corpses. I have to end this at some point, and I guess this is as good a point as any. Free Palestine, do not forget what is happening. And other creators, other media personalities, historians, sociologists, legal scholars, people who have a voice, activists, whoever you are, think about what I've said here. Maybe we can start a discussion, and maybe we can be ever so slightly more effective in the future as a result.